There's a moment that comes after the decision is made, but before the world knows. A quiet in between, when everything has already shifted inside you. But externally, nothing has changed yet. And then one day, you press send. Welcome to the Knowing Moments. I'm your host, Joy Chick. This is a space where we explore the quiet inflection points in life and career. The moments when something shifts internally before clarity and a change follow. In the last episode, I shared the decision to graduate from my Microsoft era. That moment of knowing, that realization that a chapter had become complete. But today is about something different, because making the decision privately is one thing. Revealing it to the world is something else entirely. Today's episode is called After I Press Send, and it begins with a moment I had been moving toward for weeks. The moment when I was finally ready to say it out loud. By the time announcement day arrived, I felt ready. This had not been an impulsive choice. It was very intentional. I had spent months slowing down, reflecting, experimenting, and asking deeper questions about what I wanted this next chapter to become. And once I knew, I really knew. So in the weeks leading up to the announcement, I began talking with key stakeholders. Quiet, thoughtful conversations. The kind that matter when you are closing one chapter with care and stepping into another with intention. Those conversations helped me prepare. They challenged my thinking and further increased my confidence and conviction to move forward. And by the time the final day came, I wasn't hesitant. If anything, I was excited. My sabbatical had officially ended at the end of February, and now, after weeks of preparation, it was finally time to make it real. Sitting in front of my computer, looking at the email one last time, reading it again, changing a few words, and then I changed them back. You know those edits that you make at the very end that probably don't matter at all? I was doing those. Then my hand hovered for a second over the send button. And I remember thinking, this is it. And then I clicked. And just like that, it is public. I sat there for a moment. No more edits, no more second guessing. Just done. And that's when I felt it. Not excitement, not fear, just release. Because for the first time in months, there was nothing left to decide. There was something liberating about that. This decision is now official. No more debating or self-doubt. And that felt grounding. Part of my plan all along was to launch the Knowing Moments podcast at the same time I announced my graduation from Microsoft. Not just leaving one thing, but beginning another. But of course, timelines shifted. The announcement got pulled forward by a couple days. And suddenly, I had one day to put the finishing touches on everything. The website, the episodes, the cover art, all the little details you think you have more time for, until suddenly you don't. That night felt strangely familiar, like college days, when you realize the deadline is closer than you thought. A little chaos, a little adrenaline, and honestly, a lot of excitement. One of my favorite parts of that final scramble was the cover art. When I first started this a podcast, I used AI to generate something good enough. But as launch approached, a close friend of mine who happens to be a high school art teacher offered to design something more intentional for me. His reaction was immediate. Yuck, AI generated cover art? That made me laugh. But he was right. So we started iterating ideas. And the night before launch, we were just texting back and forth, finalizing the design, debating on the colors, on the fonts. He was refining the artwork, and I was finalizing the site and episodes. And there was something just joyful about that moment. It felt alive. At that point, I felt genuinely proud to release the first 3 episodes into the world. And with that excitement, it came something else. What if this is a flop? I remember sitting there, looking at the website, and realizing this is real. It's going to be out there. And the question came quickly. What if no one listens? What if people don't connect with it? And for a moment, I just sat with that. And then asked, so what? And then when I said it loud, something shifted. Because I realized I'm not doing this to prove something. I'm doing this because it feels worth exploring. Because I'm learning, because I'm stretching. And that felt like a much better place to stand. Then the responses started to come in. Emails, messages, notes from people across the company, past and present. And what struck me most was the range of emotions in them. Some were sad, some were celebratory, some were deeply personal, some were simply warm and generous. There was a whole spectrum, and it was incredibly moving. A few of the notes stayed with me in a very particular way. One message came from a junior engineer on my team. She wrote about a moment I had completely forgotten. We were sitting next to each other at a company town hall. And when I realized she was on my team, I reacted with genuine excitement. And she told me that moment made her day and stayed with her. To me, that interaction was just my natural response to meeting someone on my team, a passing moment, but one that made a lasting impression because it came from my authentic self. That note really touched me, and it reminded me of something I think it is very important about leadership. People often remember the small moments more than the big ones. Not the major decisions, surprise announcements, or the formal speeches, but the simple ways you show up. The tone in your voice, the warmth in your reaction, the fact that you noticed them, the fact that you cared. When we are busy, especially in senior leadership roles, it is easy to think impact only comes through the big strategic moves. But that note reminded me that sometimes impact looks much smaller. Sometimes it's just a genuine hello, a small gesture of care. And those moments can stay with people longer than we realize. I also posted the announcement on LinkedIn. And interestingly, that felt different. The internal email felt familiar, contained. LinkedIn felt exposed. I remember hovering over the post button, similar to the email, but not quite the same. Because this wasn't just going to my Microsoft colleagues. This was going to everyone in the world. And once it's there, it's there. I clicked post. And almost immediately, I had this reaction. Now I really have to make this work. And underneath that thought what if this looks like a mistake? Because I wasn't announcing one of those typical next steps for my future. What if people think I walked away from something good for no good reason? What if this just looked like a placeholder, that I don't have a real plan? So I asked it again. So what? And as I sat with that, something settled. Because I realized I'm not optimizing for how this looks. I'm optimizing for whether it reflects what I actually want to explore next. And that felt like a much more honest place to stand. The response on LinkedIn was immediate and overwhelming. So many messages from people I had worked with across different chapters of my career, past to present. A bit walk down the memory lane. Names I hadn't thought about in years, moments I had almost forgotten. And the messages were incredibly encouraging, supportive, generous. But I also got a couple of texts that stayed with me in different ways. One close friend said, "Joy, you took a nice sabbatical. You're recharged. Now go back to Microsoft. Don't leave. It's a good place." Another friend asked, "So, what are you going to do exactly next?" And my first reaction was, of course, I get that. These are exactly the question I had been asking myself. The same doubts, the same worries. Because when I chose to design a portfolio of work, instead of stepping into another high-profile corporate role, this was the tension, the uncertainty. And for a moment, it made me pause. Did I really make the right decision? And then I caught myself. "Too late. It's already done," I said, with a bit chuckle. The decision, the very thoughtful decision, had already been made. Now, it was about moving forward. Then something happened that I did not quite expect. GeekWire picked up my LinkedIn post and wrote a small headline about my announcement. And then the next day, I started getting messages from friends congratulating me on my retirement. One friend texted me, "Congratulations on your retirement. Now you finally have time to relax and come visit us in Hawaii." I briefly smiled when I read it. And then immediately I thought, what? Retirement? That word hit me immediately. And I had a very strong reaction to it. No, I am not retired. I'm graduating from Microsoft. That misunderstanding was so quick, so instinctive, that it caught me something. It made me realize how deeply our professional norms are wired into us. If you don't move directly from one institution to another, the assumption is often that you must be done. You must be retiring. And if the only two legitimate paths are to move from one corporate role into another corporate role, or spending time with family and travel. But that's exactly the norm I'm trying to move beyond. Because this next chapter is not about ending. It is about re-architecting. It is about a portfolio of work. I have 3 ventures: boards, advising and investing, building and creating this podcast. It may not fit the default template people recognize immediately. And that is something I, myself, need to become fully comfortable with. A few other notes stood out to me too. One message from an industry friend said, "It takes courage to make a big change." And that line really stayed with me because it made me feel seen, not just for the visible announcement, but for everything underneath it. The uncertainty, the experimentation, the fear, the inner work required to get here. A couple days passed by. One morning, I woke up And that thought hit me again. It's very public now, and almost immediately, there was this surge of panic. I should get moving. I need to show some results soon. In reality, that fear wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from me, from my own internal drive. That very competitive, driven part of me was saying, if you are going to do this, you better make a big impact. And suddenly, every minute felt like it counted. That's when I realized that fear is exactly the point. If it felt completely certain, it wouldn't be growth. So instead of trying to eliminate the uncertainty, I'm learning to stay in it, be comfortable with it, to let the journey be the point. Through this announcement journey, a few learnings stayed with me. The first is something that surprised me. That message from the engineer, the one about a small moment during a town hall. It reminded me that leadership isn't always remembered in the big decisions. It's remembered in the small moments. The way you show up, the tone you carry, the energy you bring into a simple interaction. Sometimes it's just a genuine reaction, a simple acknowledgement. And those moments travel farther than we realize. The second learning I noticed was how uncomfortable this whole process felt, even when I knew it was right. And it made me realize something. If a decision feels completely comfortable, it's probably not a real change. Because real change stretches you. It brings uncertainty. It brings questions. And instead of trying to eliminate that feeling, maybe the work is to learn how to stay with it. To trust that discomfort is not a signal to stop, but often a signal that you are growing. And the third learning was how much the people around me mattered. Not just in the big moments, but in the quiet ones, the check-ins, the encouragement, the questions that made me pause, even the opposite perspectives. Because in moments like this, you don't move forward alone. It's the support, the village, the presence and acknowledgement of others that helps you take the next step. Revealing a decision doesn't create the change. It simply makes visible what has already shifted inside you. Because the biggest changes in our lives rarely happen all at once. They unfold through a series of quiet moments. And when you know, you know. This is the Knowing Moments. I'm Joy Chick. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.